18 years old and clutching my dream college acceptance letter. My world collapsed when a pitying bank teller whispered, "Your account is empty." My family had secretly drained my life savings to fund my sister's vanity project. They stole my future that day. So I bought theirs. If you looked at a family portrait of the Sterling household, you would immediately know who the favorite was. My older sister Harper was always positioned dead center, her golden hair perfectly styled, a dazzling pageant queen smile plastered across her face. My parents, Richard and Evelyn, would be leaning in toward her, beaming with unbridled pride. And then there was me, Chloe usually standing slightly to the side, wearing hand-me-downs, offering a strained, closed-mouth smile. Harper was the golden child. I was the afterthought. By the time I was 14, I realized that if I ever wanted to escape the stifling shadow of my sister and my parents' blatant favoritism, I would have to buy my way out. Education was my ticket, and I was determined to punch it myself. While Harper was busy racking up my parents' credit card bills on designer bags, spray tans, and weekend trips to Cabo with her friends, I was working. I started by mowing lawns and babysitting the neighborhood terrors. When I turned 16, I got a worker's permit and took on 2 jobs, a crack-of-dawn shift at a local bakery called the Fleur Mill, and a grueling evening gig bussing tables at a greasy spoon off the interstate. Every single penny I earned went into a savings account. Because I was a minor, the bank legally required an adult to be a joint account holder. I asked my mother, Evelyn, to sign the paperwork. She did so with an eye roll, muttering about how I was taking this little hoarding phase too seriously. For 4 years, I bled for that account. I missed out on prom, football games, and teenage milestones because I was too busy scrubbing marinara sauce out of my uniform or kneading dough at 4 a.m. But every time I looked at my bank statement, the sacrifice felt worth it. By the spring of my senior year, I had painstakingly amassed $68,400. It was my blood, sweat, and missing teenage years, quantified in digits. Then came the day that changed everything. A thick envelope arrived in the mail from MIT. I had been accepted into their computer science program. I remember falling to my knees in the driveway, clutching the letter to my chest, sobbing with pure, unadulterated relief. I had done it. I was getting out. All I needed to do was go to the bank, get a cashier's check for the deposit and my first semester's tuition, and my new life would begin. I drove my beat-up 1998 Toyota Corolla to the local Chase Bank branch. I walked up to the teller, a sweet older woman named Cynthia, who knew me by name because I came in every Friday to deposit my tips. "Cynthia." I got in. I beamed, sliding my withdrawal slip across the counter. "I need a cashier's check for $25,000. Cynthia smiled warmly, adjusting her glasses as she typed my account number into her terminal. But as she looked at the screen, her smile vanished. A frown creased her forehead. She typed the numbers in again. Then she looked up at me, her eyes brimming with a sickening mix of confusion and pity. "Chloe, sweetheart," she started, her voice trembling slightly. "Did you make a large transfer recently?" "No," I said, my stomach instantly dropping to my shoes. "No, I haven't touched that money." "Why?" Cynthia turned the monitor slightly so I could see. "Honey, your current available balance is $42.15. There was a wire transfer initiated by the joint account holder, your mother, 3 days ago for $68,350. The world tilted on its axis. The air was sucked out of the room. I couldn't breathe. I remember gripping the edge of the forward counter so hard my knuckles turned white. Cynthia was speaking to me, asking if I wanted her to call the manager, but her voice sounded like it was coming from underwater. I bolted out of the bank. I broke every speed limit driving back to my parents' house. I slammed the front door open, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. I found them in the living room. Evelyn and Richard were sitting on the plush leather sofa, sipping Chardonnay. Across from them sat Harper and her smug trust fund fiancé Bradley. Harper was holding up her left hand, admiring a blindingly large, gaudy diamond ring. "Where is it?" I screamed, my voice tearing through the quiet, affluent hum of the house. My mother sighed, setting her wineglass down with an annoyed clink. "Chloe, please. No need for hysterics. What are you screaming about?" "My money! My college fund, the $68,000 I spent 4 years breaking my back for. Where the hell is it, Ma?" Silence fell over the room. Bradley looked awkwardly at his loafers. Harper just rolled her eyes, leaning back into the sofa cushions. "Don't speak to your mother with that tone," my father Richard barked, finally standing up. "We were going to tell you tonight at dinner." "Tell me what?" Evelyn crossed her legs, looking at me as if I were a toddler throwing a tantrum over a stolen toy. Harper and Bradley had an incredible investment opportunity. They are launching a luxury wellness and lifestyle brand, Orabella. It's going to be huge, but the venture capitalists needed them to match the seed funding. Plus, they needed the deposit for the country club for the wedding. We didn't have the liquid cash right now, Chloe. I stared at her, entirely unable to process the sheer audacity of the words coming out of her mouth. You stole my money, my MIT tuition, for a fake business and a party." "It's not stolen," Harper chimed in, her voice dripping with condescension. "It's an investment, Chloe. God, you're so dramatic. We'll pay you back eventually, when the company goes public. Besides, you're the smart one. You've always got straight A's. Just get some scholarships, or take out a student loan like normal people do." "I earned that money," I shrieked, tears of absolute rage finally spilling hot over my cheeks. "I worked night shifts while you were getting drunk on Daddy's yacht. I earned every single cent, and you stole it." "Enough," my father roared. "Your sister is getting married, and she's starting her future. You are 18 years old. You have plenty of time to figure things out. We made a family decision. You are living under our roof, and that money was legally in your mother's name, too." End of discussion. A cold, terrifying calm suddenly washed over me. The tears stopped. The shaking ceased. I looked at the four of them, these strangers who were supposedly my family. They weren't just unapologetic. They genuinely believed I existed merely to be collateral damage in the grand, glamorous life of Harper Sterling. "A family decision," I repeated, my voice dropping to a deadly whisper. "Right." I turned around, walked up to my tiny bedroom, and grabbed a duffel bag. I packed exactly 7 days' worth of clothes, my laptop, my chargers, and my toothbrush. I walked back downstairs. They were already laughing again, clinking glasses, celebrating Harper's brilliant new business. "You just bought a wedding," I said from the hallway, my voice cutting through their laughter like a scythe. They turned to look at me. "But you lost a daughter. Don't ever try to contact me again." Before they could even formulate a response, I walked out the front door and let it slam behind me. I spent my first 3 weeks of independence living in the backseat of my Toyota Corolla in a 24-hour Walmart parking lot. I lost my spot at MIT. The deadline for the deposit came and went, and despite my desperate calls to the financial aid office, they couldn't conjure a full-ride scholarship out of thin air just because my family had robbed me. My heart broke, but I didn't have time to mourn the loss of my dream school. I was too busy trying not to freeze to death at night. Eventually, I saved enough from my bakery and diner jobs to rent a tiny, mold-infested room in the basement of a rundown house in Seattle, subletting from an elderly woman named Mrs. Higgins. Hansuch. The room had a mattress on the floor, a single exposed light bulb, and it smelled permanently of damp earth and cat urine. But it had a door that locked, and it was mine. I needed to make more money. I quit the bakery and took a full-time overnight job as a dispatcher for a mid-sized freight and logistics company called Apex Hauling. From 10 p.m. to 6 p.m., I sat in a windowless warehouse office, fielding calls from angry truck drivers, tracking lost shipments on a whiteboard, and dealing with a chaotic, outdated paper filing system that felt like it belonged in the 1980s. It was miserable, soul-crushing work, but it was also the crucible where my empire was born. Sitting in that dim office at 3 a.m., fueled by cheap instant coffee and sheer spite, I realized something. Apex Hauling was losing tens of thousands of dollars a month purely due to logistical inefficiencies. Drivers were taking deadhead routes, driving empty trucks, cargo was sitting on docks for days because paperwork was lost, and communication was entirely fragmented. I knew I was good with computers. I had taught myself basic coding in high school. So I went to the local public library during my off hours and checked out every book I could find on Python, database management, and cloud architecture. I bought a cheap refurbished second monitor from a pawn shop, and I started building. For 8 months, I slept 3 hours a day. I worked my shift. I came back to my moldy basement, and I coded. I was building a proprietary cloud-based logistics software designed to automate dispatching, optimize routes using real-time traffic and weather data, and digitize the entire paper trail of the freight industry. I called it ClearRoute. When I finally had a working prototype, I walked into the office of Thomas Jenkins, the gruff, terrifying owner of Apex Hauling. I slammed my laptop down on his desk and said, "Give me 10 minutes to show you this, and I promise I will save your company $200,000 this quarter. If I fail, you can fire me." Thomas laughed, puffing on his cheap cigar, but he gave me the 10 minutes. 30 days later, ClearRoute was fully integrated into his system. By the end of the quarter, I hadn't saved him $200,000. I had saved him $500,000. Word in the trucking industry spreads faster than a wildfire. Thomas bragged about his new efficiency to his golf buddies who owned other logistics firms. Suddenly, I was getting phone calls. I wasn't an employee anymore. I was a B2B software vendor. I quit my dispatching job, incorporated ClearRoute Tech, and started licensing my software for a hefty monthly subscription fee. Fast forward 4 brutal, exhausting, glorious years. I was 22 years old. I hadn't spoken a single word to my family since the day I walked out. ClearRoute Tech exploded. We expanded beyond freight into maritime shipping and e-commerce supply chains. I secured a massive Series A funding round led by a ruthless but brilliant venture capitalist named Taylor Pendleton, who saw the fire in my eyes and mentored me on how to swim with the corporate sharks. I moved out of the moldy basement and into a sleek penthouse. I traded my beat-up Corolla for an Audi. My company was recently valued at $45 million, and we were gearing up to acquire smaller tech assets. While my star was rising, I occasionally indulged in a guilty pleasure, using a fake Instagram account to keep tabs on Harper. Unsurprisingly, Orabella, her luxury wellness brand, was a spectacular disaster. It turned out that buying organic bath bombs in bulk from China, repackaging them with a fancy logo, and paying Instagram influencers thousands of dollars to promote them was not a sustainable business model. Harper and Bradley had burned through my stolen $68,000 along with their venture capital in less than a year. The lavish wedding had happened, but the marriage had imploded shortly after Bradley was caught sleeping with one of Orabella's hired influencers. They were divorced, the business was shuttered, and from what I could gather, Harper had moved back into our parents' house. I felt a twinge of dark satisfaction, but I was too busy building my empire to dwell on it. Until one Tuesday morning, my past walked right into my present. My chief financial officer, David, walked into my glass-walled corner office carrying a thick manila folder. "Morning, Chloe," David said, taking a seat across from my desk. "I've got the portfolio of distressed commercial debts from the regional bank we discussed. As you know, we need to expand our physical server farms. Buying up defaulted commercial properties through debt acquisition is a ruthless way to get the real estate for pennies on the dollar, but it's highly effective. I'm fine with ruthless, David." "That's business," I replied, sipping my espresso. "Did you find a suitable property?" "I did," David said, sliding a specific file across the desk toward me. It's a prime piece of commercial real estate just outside the city. It was heavily mortgaged to fund a retail startup that went belly up a couple of years ago. The debtors took out a massive second mortgage on their primary residential home to try and save the commercial property. But they defaulted on both. The bank is ready to offload the entire debt package to us for a fraction of the cost. Meaning? I asked, flipping the file open. Meaning, David smiled sharply, if we buy this debt portfolio, we effectively own the commercial property. And we also hold the mortgage on the debtor's personal home. We could foreclose on them tomorrow if we wanted to. I looked down at the paperwork. The blood froze in my veins. The name of the failed retail business was listed as Arabella LLC, and the names of the debtors, the people whose commercial property and personal home were now entirely at the mercy of my signature, were printed clearly in black ink. Richard and Evelyn Sterling, my parents. They had bet the house literally to save Harper's failing vanity project, and now I was holding the deed. I sat in my office, the silence ringing in my ears as I stared at the names on the foreclosure documents. Richard and Evelyn Sterling. Are you absolutely certain about this, David? I asked, my voice terrifyingly steady. David, ever the meticulous CFO, tapped the manila folder. I had our legal team at Kirkland and Ellis run a triple check on the titles, and we pulled the collateral audit straight from Wells Fargo. It's airtight, Chloe. Your sister's LLC defaulted on a $2.4 million commercial note. To secure that note in the first place, a secondary lien was placed on the Mercer Island residential property. When Arabella went under, the bank initiated proceedings. We just bought the entire distressed debt portfolio for 60 cents on the dollar. Legally speaking, Clearroot Tech is now their sole creditor. A slow, icy smile crept across my face. For 4 years, the phantom pain of my stolen college fund had burned a hole in my chest. Now, fate hadn't just handed me an opportunity for payback. It had handed me the deed to their entire lives. Draft the notice of default, I instructed. And David, have it delivered by private courier. But before the courier arrives, I'm going to make a personal house call. 2 days later, I drove my Audi R8 up the winding, manicured streets of Mercer Island. The neighborhood still smelled of old money, freshly cut grass, and suffocating entitlement. I pulled into the driveway of my childhood home. The famad colonial house looked exactly the same, though the landscaping was slightly overgrown. A leased Mercedes SUV sat in the driveway covered in a thin layer of dust. I stepped out, adjusting the cuffs of my tailored Tom Ford suit, and walked up to the heavy oak door. I didn't knock. I still had the brass key I had taken with me the night I left. I slid it into the lock, turned it, and pushed the door open. The house was quiet. I walked into the grand foyer, my heels ticking sharply against the Italian marble floors. Voices drifted from the formal dining room. I followed the sound. Richard, Evelyn, and Harper were gathered around the mahogany dining table, surrounded by a sea of paperwork, overdue bills, and legal notices. The atmosphere was thick with panic and cheap scotch. Harper looked disheveled. Her golden hair was tied in a messy knot, and the dark circles under her eyes were visible even from across the room. My mother looked up first. She gasped, dropping a red-stamped envelope onto the table. Chloe? Evelyn breathed, her hand flying to her chest. Richard and Harper whipped their heads around. For a split second there was total silence. Then a sickeningly predictable transformation occurred. The panic on their faces melted into sudden, desperate relief. They took in my expensive suit, my diamond watch, the sheer aura of wealth I carried with me. They didn't see the daughter they had betrayed. They saw a walking ATM. "Oh my God, Chloe," Harper cried, shooting up from her chair and rushing toward me with open arms. I held up a single manicured hand, stopping her dead in her tracks. "Don't touch me." Harper froze, her fake smile faltering. "Chloe, please. We were talking about calling you. We saw the Forbes article about your software company. We are so proud of you. Save it, Harper, I snapped, my voice cold enough to freeze nitrogen. I walked past her and approached the dining table, looking down at the scattered bills. Having some financial trouble, I see. Oh, My father cleared his throat, puffing out his chest to feign authority. It's a temporary liquidity issue. The market has been tough on retail startups. We just need a bridge loan to tide us over until the property sells. Since you're doing so well, Chloe, we thought perhaps you could step up for the family. You owe us that much. We raised you after all. I actually laughed. It was a harsh, bitter sound that echoed off the vaulted ceilings. I owe you? That's a fascinating perspective, Richard. Tell me, did you run that logic by the loan officers at Wells Fargo before they stamped your commercial property for foreclosure? Evelyn's face strained of all color. How do you know about that? I reached into my leather briefcase and pulled out a thick, bound dossier. I dropped it onto the center of the mahogany table with a heavy, satisfying thud. Because, Mother, Wells Fargo doesn't own your debt anymore. They bundled it and sold it to a corporate holding firm to clear their ledgers. I leaned over the table, bracing my hands on the wood, and looked them dead in the eyes. And I own the holding firm. The color left Richard's face. Harper stumbled backward as if she'd been physically struck. You bought our debt? Richard stammered, his bravado entirely evaporating. Every single penny of it, I purred. Which means I hold the mortgage on that massive, empty retail space downtown. And more importantly, I hold the second mortgage on this house. You are entirely at my mercy. Chloe, you can't do this, Evelyn shrieked, tears springing to her eyes. This is our home. You wouldn't throw your own parents out on the street. You threw me into the back of a freezing Toyota Corolla in a Walmart parking lot. I roared, the rage I had suppressed for 4 years finally breaking loose. You stole $68,000 from a teenager. You stole my admission to MIT. You didn't care if I starved as long as Harper got her fancy organic bath bombs and a country club wedding. Harper, finally finding her voice, stepped forward, her eyes flashing with venom. It was an accident. The business just didn't scale. You're a billionaire now, Chloe, or whatever. What is $2 million to you? Just forgive the debt. It's a rounding error for your company. Nah. Abdies. It's not about the money, Harper, I whispered, my voice dropping back to that deadly calm. It's about the fact that you haven't learned a single thing. And it's about the fact that you're a criminal. Harper scoffed. A criminal? Please. I flipped open the dossier to a tabbed page containing forensic accounting reports generated by KPMG. When my firm acquired this debt, we ran a standard due diligence audit on the original loan applications. It's standard corporate protocol. But what my forensic accountants found wasn't standard at all. I pointed to a highlighted section of a bank statement. When you secured the initial $2.4 million Small Business Administration loan, Harper, the bank required your parents' home as collateral, but Richard and Evelyn didn't have enough equity to cover it. So you inflated their assets. You forged income statements, but that's not even the best part. I turned the page, revealing a copy of a notarized signature document. I remember my mother's signature very well, I said, looking at Evelyn, who was currently trembling like a leaf. She signed the withdrawal slip to steal my college fund, remember? With this signature on the secondary lien, this isn't hers. Is it, Harper? Evelyn gasped, looking at the document, then snapping her head toward Harper. What is she talking about? Harper, I only signed the first round of funding. Shut up, Harper yelled, her face flushing crimson. Chloe, you don't know what you're looking at. Nout. If I am looking at felony wire fraud, bank fraud, and forgery, I stated clearly. You forged our mother's signature on a federal loan document using a shady notary named Gary Higgins to secure a second mortgage she didn't know about. You didn't just steal my money, Harper. You stole your parents' house out from under them. Richard gripped the edge of the table, looking at his golden child with a mix of horror and absolute disgust. For the first time in my life, I saw the pedestal shatter. Harper wasn't the golden child anymore. She was the anchor, dragging them to the bottom of the ocean. "I am officially calling the debt in," I announced, snapping the dossier shut. "You have 30 days to vacate this premises. If you fight me, or if you refuse to leave, my legal team will hand this KPMG forensic audit directly to the FBI, and Harper will be facing 10 to 15 years in federal prison for defrauding the SBA. I turned around and walked toward the door. "Chloe, wait!" Richard begged, his voice cracking. "Where are we supposed to go? We have nothing." I paused at the threshold, looking back at the family that had tried to destroy me. "There's a moldy basement in Seattle," I said softly. "I hear it's character building." I kept my promise. There was no leniency, only consequences. The eviction notice was served the next morning, and within days any illusion of control my father clung to collapsed. His high-powered attorney reviewed the evidence and refused to fight a losing battle. The fraud was undeniable. They had nothing left. On the 30th day, I watched from a tinted car as their world unraveled. Movers carried out what little remained of their life boxes, replacing the luxury that once defined them. The Mercedes was gone, the memberships revoked. My mother looked diminished, my father reduced to arguing over trivialities, clinging to pride that no longer had value. Harper, once untouchable, stuffed her designer clothes into garbage bags, her fall the most complete of all. Karma hadn't arrived. Gently it had erased everything. Over the following months, I tracked their descent with clinical detachment. Legal consequences caught up to Harper, stripping away what little she had left. My parents downsized into obscurity, forced into lives they would have once pitied. They reached out twice. I ignored both. Whatever we had once been no longer existed. While their world shrank, mine expanded. I transformed the ruins of their failed ambitions into the foundation of something real. Kerwood Tech grew rapidly, built on discipline, precision, and vision. By 25, I took it public. The market responded instantly. Standing above the San Francisco skyline, I finally understood the truth. They hadn't destroyed me. They had removed every safety net, and that forced me to become unstoppable. If Chloe's story proves anything, it's that the greatest revenge isn't anger, it's massive, undeniable success. Have you ever had a moment where someone underestimated you and you proved them entirely wrong? Drop your story in the comments below. If you loved this tale of ultimate karma, make sure to hit that like button, share this video with your friends, and subscribe for more insane real-life drama.